Why is it important? Or is it important? Yes, of course it is. Because if we get back to the basic of what a currency is, a medium of exchange of value between individuals, entities, over space and time. So if we need to exchange value, it's critical that we all assign the same value to these currency units, so that when I accept some currency units from someone, I don't have to wonder and question whether everyone else I will transact with in the future will also assign some value, very much like me, to these same units. Otherwise, it completely defeats the point of a currency. So how do we design for it? If you have a centralized system, like the fiat system we're all accustomed to, it's super easy. You just enforce that legally. You make a law that says everyone is obliged to accept these currencies. These euros, they are fungible. So that means if you give me 10 euros and next week I'm supposed to refund you, I'm not obliged to give you the very same note. It's not about the physical piece of paper. It's about the abstract units. And these are fungible because they are legal tender. So I can give you a different note. I can give you a different denomination. As long as the amount is the same, you are forced to accept it. So it's super easy to do if the system is centralized. But in a decentralized context, there is no one that can enforce that sort of fungibility, that sort of property, and force everyone to accept it. So the only way to do this is to make the units indistinguishable. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that there is no information that distinguishes one from another, namely that there is no history that could affect the value as perceived by the various users of the system. And that's where fungibility ties to privacy or anonymous currencies, which are not just private, they're just fulfilling a very basic property of what a currency should do. How is the crypto space doing? Very quickly, extremely badly, not a surprise. Bitcoin is extremely transparent, always was, but the perception has changed and it's more recognized nowadays. Just last week, there was a Bloomberg article mentioning that the newly mined coins, Bitcoins, they go for up to 20% premium, which is quite a nifty price to pay just to make sure there is no history attached. And some people are willing to pay for that. Another example is, I hear often the concept of the join market, where basically you have a coin join market where people can mix together. And I hear that as an answer to the lack of fungibility of Bitcoin. But if you think about it, it's just, in the name itself, it's a market. There are people that are willing to pay to mix their coins, and there are people that are being retributed for providing liquidity. So in the very definition of this market, there is a recognition that all units or all outputs are not actually equal in value, and everyone participating on that market assign a different value, whether you are mixing from one side or the other. What is very bad, in my view, is also why I want to talk about fungibility. The crypto space is doing badly because we don't recognize the scale of the problem. We don't recognize the issue, and therefore, we brush it over, and we are not tackling technically all of these challenges the way we should do it. Are privacy and fungibility the same thing? They're extremely close concepts. In my view, privacy is something that you can talk about at the micro level. So what I call the micro level is the level of the scale of a user. So you can act privately with the currency within your own life, within your own context. And fungibility is something at the macro level. It's a systemic property of the currency itself. And to obtain fungibility, you need to have privacy. That's a requirement in a decentralized system. But that's not sufficient. You need to have privacy by default. So for instance, if I take the example of Zcash, which, to simplify, as transparent and shielded, obfuscated, anonymous transactions, well, there you have it. You have a difference between the transparent one and the non-transparent one. So if I am an exchange, I could very well say, I'm only going to accept transparent transactions, which they do at the moment for technical reasons. But I could also say, I'm only ever going to accept Zcash that at least 2 transactions down the line in the past didn't touch any of the anonymous ones. So it's not fungible. Should we be concerned? Yes, I'm very concerned. I hope I can, share a bit of that concern with you. The way I see it is that Bitcoin, at the beginning of the adoption curve, is adding a lot of benefits. It's immediately adding value compared to the fiat system we are accustomed with, censorship resistant, speed of transaction, programmable money, etc. And that's what we are witnessing at the beginning of the adoption. But what would happen after we pass a certain threshold? Imagine a society that would be purely using Bitcoin. It would be a dystopian nightmare. And I think we are intellectually lazy in that we're pushing for something without actually seriously wondering where are we going with that. I call that intellectual laziness at best. Or worse, selfish financial interest. Well, maybe I'm missing some last slide. So what I want to make clear also is that a second thing is fungibility. I think you should be more familiar with the concept, because in that room, probably everyone is very aware of privacy, and it's very easy to convince one another in that audience that privacy is a good thing, we should work toward privacy. But if you want to convince the rest of the world, the average Joe, you will need to talk about fungibility, because that's how you get a functioning currency. That's how we will get the big businesses, even the banks, to have our back, to actually push in the same direction as us, by making clear that this is not about, privacy properties of some geek somewhere that in a social subset. It's actually a very requirement of a currency. So, yeah, I like seeing fungibility mentioned more. I think we should see more panels that are a bit broader in discussion, and I wanted to mention that because I think looking at it from a purely private perspective is really too narrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you a lot for introduction to fungibility, and I would like to open our discussion. I prepared a lot of questions. I think we don't have time for all these questions, and I would like to start with the one very traditional question. Please briefly introduce yourself, describe what project you are working on, and what is important, why do you consider truly anonymous cryptocurrencies to be important? Why all these people should start to use it? Why do you consider anonymity to be like must thing? So this is my question to all of you.
I start?
Yeah, for
okay,
example.
Hello everyone, my name is Arno Pfefferling. I gave yesterday a presentation about CK Snarks. I currently in the business development team from Horizon. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to bring privacy from the cryptocurrency horizon to some industry partners or to businesses. That is why, for example, yesterday I showed a decentralized application based on shielded transactions. And yeah, this is my main purpose right now. Today, I hope we can discuss kind of these governmental issues which we have in Europe, or even the fact that on the decentralized exchanges, we are not seeing much privacy coins. These are the kind of 2 points which I prepared for the talk. Yeah, and if you have questions to yesterday, of course, we have also other people here who are able to answer well. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm Peter Todd, professional applied cryptography consultant, and I've in the past contributed to Bitcoin Core. Currently my stuff I'm working on is really about client-side validation approaches, which are a very different approach to creating consensus applications. And, I think, we could elaborate on this, but I think, the long story short there is things that scale inherently have good privacy. Because the reason why things have bad privacy is because you're broadcasting all information off to the world. And when you fix that problem and still have a decentralized application, you inherently won't wind up with much better privacy than you do today on Bitcoin. It's also why I'm perhaps a little more optimistic than he was about Bitcoin's privacy. Because after all, things like Lightning have very good privacy, and they have to work. And for the bigger picture, well, why do I think this is important? I think it's quite simple that privacy is a tool that levels power. The powerful people in the world, they have very good privacy. That's just a reality. They can move money around the world anonymously without us being able to determine where it went and who got it and so on. You can create shell companies, you can do all kinds of fancy things. You can go pass laws that make it irrelevant. It's the little guys, it's the regular average people who need that power through privacy to take back power from people who'd like to take it away from them. So privacy is an essential tool for democracy.
So, binary fate. I was a postdoc researcher in combinatorial optimization, AI. Then I went more and more into Bitcoin, and then Monero later on, since 2012. I've been involved with Monero since pretty much the beginning. I've had various businesses on Bitcoin. I had a non-chain casino, and Peter was the first one to double spend it. And I have businesses that are evolving around Monero, so I'm a bit more entrepreneurial now. So to get back to that question, I think the premise is wrong that the privacy coin are going to push much further than what we know nowadays and take for granted. I think we have to realize that the fiat world we are accustomed to is actually very private, at least between individuals. Then you have law enforcement that can step in and learn a lot about everything they want, at least with your banking activity. But between the citizens and the individuals interacting, we have near perfect privacy. And Bitcoin is a huge step backward, and I see the privacy coin as just a mean to get back to basically what we took for granted. So without even going in political ideals and principle, it's just a way to keep what we've been using forever.
Okay, thank you. My another question will be non-technical. I also have a lot of technical questions. More skeptical one. So, do you think that it's only a question of time when our governments, or maybe your governments, because I don't have any government, so some governments maybe will prohibit truly anonymous cryptocurrencies? Because there were a lot of public statements, for example, from FBI, that they're afraid of Zcash and Monero. So, what do you think about this? It's only a question of time. Should we expect like these?
I have a story, for example. We have around the world some regional representatives, and for example, in Japan, there is like a strict no-go for privacy coins on any exchange. So Japan is, for example, prohibiting right now. Mm-hmm. And another thing is that if I look in Europe, then every one of you, for example, can Google it. We have, since last year, the EU program Titanium, which is called Tools for the Investigation of Transaction in Underground Markets. And of course, what they mainly do is they have well-paid scientific people who are looking in the Bitcoin transactions. So to answer this question, what they are doing right now is observing in Europe, trying to find the bad people, to say so. And then if the normal average people are also on these observations, because they don't know in the beginning when they start observing, then of course they might be also getting police at the door. So it's not prohibition right now in EU, and we have a lot of programs who are wanting to have this tokenization and stuff, but we have to be careful, and it's dangerous because they're observing already. And for Ethereum, it's also just a matter of time until they start deeping looking more and more in detail of the smart contract interactions, ICO and stuff. So I also would be there very carefully, because in Ethereum the same. Right now, mostly everything is transparent, stored forever. So this is a comment from my side.
I mean, the question, the way it was asked, kind of singles out anonymous currencies. Well, in fact, I'd also point out, I mean, less anonymous currencies, you know, ones like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're also getting banned in countries. You know, maybe, you know, a more scary question to ask is, you know, are we getting to a point where being able to participate in the economy is something that governments are trying to guarantee they have control over? And I think the answer to that is definitely there are places in the world which are moving towards that or already have it. You know, you see proposals cropping up even in the EU and the US and Canada to ban the ownership of unregistered wealth. And essentially what that would mean is anything that's valuable, you know, be it a painting, be it a ring passed down in your family, you know, be it a car. These people who are pushing these proposals want you to register that with the government so that they know exactly how much wealth you have and know where to take it if they need it. You know, what that's really doing is creating incredibly fascist control over your ability to participate in the economy. Without the ability to participate in the economy, you also don't have the ability to participate in politics. And, you know, I'll give a personal example. The scariest client I've ever had kind of came up to me, and it was through an intermediary, and asked, you know, could you go help us take this fork of Bitcoin and create this coin, and the idea is we're going to use it to replace all currency, all cash in this country. And I kind of asked, all right, well, what are your requirements? And went, well, invoices to be uploaded to this chain. You know, if you bought a magazine, they wanted the name of the magazine uploaded to government servers. And well, that should kind of scare people already, but I kind of asked, well, all right, what country is this? And they kind of hummed and hawed, well, you know, I can't really tell you, you know, maybe once you sign all this paper and so on. But I did get them to admit it was some dictatorship off in like Africa somewhere. And it was pretty obvious what they're trying to do. They wanted to clamp down on political dissent. You know, if you control your economy, you can make sure you can't have political opponents. But the sad thing is, we're already moving that in many countries like Canada. You know, people are using Visa and MasterCard more and more for payments. And when you use Visa, increasingly the standards are uploading exactly what you buy, right down to the individual items, up to a Visa server, who then is allowed to sell that data to anyone they want.
I think we were seeing the very same declaration of intents from governments with Bitcoin just a few years back. It was really the same narrative. And what happened is that some people fought against, and what that means is educate, give them the knowledge and element so that they recognize it would be shooting themselves in the foot to actually ban something. So the US, for instance, is now, I believe, reasonably pro-Bitcoin, thanks to people like the Coin Center, etc. And I think we should just do the same with the so-called privacy coins. We should just give them the basic knowledge and understanding that the properties of these currencies are not, you know, just for an audience like us, but they're actually useful to any business that doesn't want to reveal their transactions and activity to competitors and so on. And personally, I have faith that if we give that education and that knowledge to the business sector, to countries that are democratic and are willing to bet on innovation, they are not going to step in and ban it up front. So I think in the next years, if we do well, and if we manage to switch back the narrative to the fact that it's just basic properties that we need in any such system, we will see positive surprise.
Yeah. So I think the situation is really serious. I used to make jokes that in Czech Republic or even the whole European Union, it's not possible even to buy in the online porn without revealing your first name and surname and your credit card information. So if you don't use cryptocurrencies now, you are not able to buy online porn, for example, which is pretty crazy, I think. Anyway, so I'd like to continue with the most catastrophic question. Do you think that even like cryptocurrency users can be criminalized? I mean, just because they won't register their birth, to the governments.
I mean, anything can be criminalized.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, even in democratic, well, ostensibly democratic countries, all kinds of things get criminalized. Yeah, I think the question really is, you know, in the exact circumstance, how many people can get away with it and escape punishment? You know, an example that kind of comes to mind is, I was kind of shocked to find this when I first visited Italy. You can't offer Wi-Fi in Italy without getting the identities of everyone who connects. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, you go to McDonald's and it wants you to go give up your phone number, which is just like they do in China, only in China they want your passport. But, you know, it's basically the same kind of construct, and you can push whatever laws you want. Now, does that mean they're effective? Does that mean they can go and actually enforce them? Well, I mean, it's a bit mixed. You know, in Italy, it's not that hard to go ask the guy next to you, hey, you know, mind if I borrow your phone number for a second? You know, just gotta enter this in and get my Wi-Fi. You know, or some people don't even bother following the law on this. In China, the court system is a bit more scary, so probably more people could comply, but also a lot don't. And, you know, I mean, it's always just a matter of kind of push and shove and what you'll do to make it possible to escape the law, which is a good thing. You know, and I think part of it is also the recognition among society that violating laws is very often the ethical thing to do, because the laws aren't ethical. And we should always remember that. You know, ask for yourself, is it right to go comply with this law? Because if this law is not right, well, it's not right.
Thank you. I think it's time to switch to more optimistic topic, to to technical questions. So I'm going to start with the technical
Yeah, I like
questions.
ponies.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for these catastrophic, probably true scenarios. Anyway, so there are still a lot of things and challenges to improve the privacy of truly anonymous cryptocurrencies. So we are still waiting for COVID router in case of Monero, for example, bulletproofs and so on. So my question is like purely technical. Are there any new cool features of truly anonymous cryptocurrencies we should expect in the near future? You are ever.
Okay, I generally agree on the fact that in the privacy currencies we are doing a lot of progress. More and more coins are coming up. We also see like the Greencoin, Mimblewimble project, like community driven. So yes, we're doing good, and what I see in future, because I am doing this business development thing, is that we will find some industry partners who are interested in this intransparent functions. So they will adapt it just for special use cases, healthcare, for example, one, or governance processes. If it comes to voting, it is interesting to keep the ballot, I think, like the information who voted yes and no, intransparent until the voting period ends. And this special unique cases, this will come in near future, is my proposal from my view.
I mean, I'd say I'm actually mostly not about coins per se, but rather what's built on top of them. You know, Lightning, I think, is your best example. Mm-hmm. Lightning transactions are very private. You know, they're about the security model is basically the same as Tor, which you need for good privacy anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, when I go pay on Lightning, it goes through multiple hops till it gets to a destination. None of that data is by default recorded anywhere. It's not made public. And if I can trust the hops I have to go and at least one of them throw away that data, it is incredibly difficult to figure out who I paid. And I mean, that's just inherent output of something that scales. It scales because it doesn't keep track of this data. It doesn't broadcast it. You know, obviously you can attack it in much the same way as you can attack Zcash by running a whole bunch of nodes and man-in-the-middle attacking people and running Tor nodes that keep data and so on. But the default of all this tech is very, very good, and it has to be to work.
I would just introduce a grain of salt with that. I agree it's probably an improvement, but I think without knowing the eventual topology of the Lightning Network, which is governed by economic incentive primarily, I think it's a bit optimistic to assume that it will magically solve our problem. I think it's just a different security model in terms of privacy, in that you don't store data into the blockchain, which is very similar to Wimble. But yeah, as you say, you can still listen to the network. You can have parties that have actually a financial incentive to give away all the information they are facilitating over the network, etc. So it's probably going to help, but I think we should keep an eye and make sure that it's done proper.
Thing is, that's the same security model Tor has, which you need to do.
Like onion routing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but
you
I
know, 'cause
also want to
this
comment
tech
on
doesn't work in isolation. This work. Yeah, I mean, as an example, if I stood here right on the stage, and I said to, you know, this guy right here, two people over, all right, I'm going to go give you $100 on Lightning, or I'm going to give you $100 in Zcash. And either way, the fact I've gone and paid him just is already de-anonymized because there are other observers. You know, there's more than just the currency you got to worry about. You also got to worry about how do you actually connect to the person. And the security model of Lightning has that same kind of issue. And equally, if you, as a volunteer, want to say, all right, I want to go and run Lightning routing services, and I'll make the claim, yes, this is anonymous, just like running a Tor node, please trust me on this. It's the same model all over again. I promise them to throw away my data. I also run a Tor node. I promise I'm not going to keep logs. And it's the same economic incentives, too. I run a Tor node. Well, if I go keep data, I can go sell it to law enforcement, which incidentally, people have done. Heck, there's a guy active in Ethereum right now who's somewhat infamous for getting us started in crypto by doing that. And to their credit, the law enforcement actually kind of turned him away, probably because they already were doing it, but you know, it's the same model.
Like the Zcash trusted setup as well.
Well, trusted setup's different. I mean, trusted setup, if you go and do an additional verification, which isn't really done properly yet, should not break privacy.
Yeah, well, if they were giving the tools to do that, that would be a big plus.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is a question probably most people here want to ask. So the question is to Monero team, also to Zencash or Horizon team. So the question is, when can we expect the fully functional hardware support of Monero or Zcash private transaction and also Horizon private transaction in hardware wallets?
Well, Monero, it's easy. You can expect it 6 months ago.
As I know, only Nano Ledger as is support. I use it. I tested it works. That's fine. But I'm just asking for Monero hardware project.
So the Monero specific. So within Monero, we have it's a very fluid self-assembly project, and we have a group of people that decided to build hardware things related to Monero, one way or another. Michael is spearheading that team. He was giving a talk yesterday. So the main project was an open source hardware wallet designed from scratch. That I'm not a hardware guy. I believe somehow it's very similar to the Trezor in the specifications. And as far as I'm aware, but you should check with him afterwards, the hardware part is basically done, and now we just need the firmware in order to make it functional. Maybe.
Okay.
Horizon and hardware wallet support.
Yeah, I'm not the developer team, so we are also looking in it. We got the ledger with the transparent transactions. The shielded transactions, they need mainly memory. But what I did is to give you as audience some interesting facts that, for example, the small TV boxes, which are used for 4K streaming, mainly, for example, S912, it's an 8-core, 2 gigahertz device, and you have 3 gigabyte of DDR4 memory in it. It has HDMI and power supply, everything is there, you just can buy. And it has a bootloader where you can, for example, bring in Armbian, and with this kind of Ubuntu OS, you can set up a full Spring wallet, and then you have your shielded transactions, and it's like hand-sized. It's nothing out yet much. Maybe it's not possible. I just looked in the specifications, and technically, this kind of device will work with any shielded transaction which is coming from Zcash or Horizon.
Yeah, I'll just go jump in. Like, I'm giving a talk on hardware wallets in a few hours later, and you know, I'm actually kind of skeptical about hardware wallets in general. You know, it's not clear to me how much better they really are versus getting a laptop randomly out of a store and then just installing your own OS in it and your own setup on it. You know, or equally like buying an iPhone that you use for nothing else and installing, you know, a standard wallet app. because when you buy a piece of hardware for the specific purpose of storing cryptocurrency, and the seller knows you're going to do that, that's a big target. They know that if they compromise this device and they succeed at this, they can steal money. So, you know, it's not clear to me how much we should really focus on this. Of course, the UI, you know, the user experience of just holding the small thing in your hand, it can be quite nice. But often people, I think, don't use it in ways that are actually as conducive to security as they think it is.
Thanks for your opinion. Next question. Personally, I'm quite angry with KYC, AML, bureaucracy. So this is the reason why a few months ago I decided to stop using centralized crypto exchanges, and I'm trying decentralized crypto exchanges like Bisq, for example. So, but unfortunately, I didn't find any Monero or Zcash or Horizon decentralized market with sufficient liquidity. So my question is, and you probably are able to answer to this question, is do you know some decentralized crypto exchanges with a good liquidity where we can buy or sell truly anonymous cryptocurrencies without this stupid KYC, AML, bureaucracy and limits? Question.
Yeah, I have good information for Monero because you're listed on the Wave stacks. So Monero is actually on kind of a decentralized exchange. I don't know if it's 100% decentralized, but Waves is a Russian project, and it is claiming to have decentralized Waves, yeah, like Waves.
Okay.
And there is Monero. I don't know if it's true because I used CoinMarketCap, so of course there might be some errors. And about the volume, which he said, like Bisq has roughly 200,000 US dollar volume 24 hours, and Waves, for example, 2.6 million. So I think if we ask about the amount which is there, it's okay. And then we have another one, it's the Stellar DEX, where we have the 0x privacy project. It is listed there. I'm not sure if you have intransparent transactions there as well. I don't know. You can look into it. So the message here is we are going there. Privacy coins are reaching this area. Of course, we have generally then the problem if we are using intransparent transactions, we don't know much about the volume, and this is kind of a KPI to measure how good the exchange works. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And the last technical question is, what do you think about Greencoin and Mimble protocol? If you have any opinion, just tell us.
As I mentioned earlier, I think it's a different security model in terms of privacy, in that you try not to stick the data onto the chain, so you greatly reduce the attack surface of anyone just looking at the blockchain. It has tremendous scalability properties, so it's something that personally I'm interested in for technical reasons, and because it might enable principles and ideals that I believe in. I guess most of the Monero community is feeling the same, and if there is some way one day that we can integrate that sort of technology through a sidechain or anything like that, probably there will be a lot of interest to do it.
Peter?
I'd just go point out, yeah, I think people have often overstated the scalability of Mimble. They're kind of under the impression that transactions can be indefinitely sort of combined into one another. There's sort of this this concept in Mimble that if I pay you and then you pay him and then he pays the next guy in the row, all those four transactions can be combined, and that's not actually quite true, because there still is some data left over at every step, and that data does need to be stored indefinitely, does need to be verified indefinitely. Whereas equally, this idea that in Bitcoin, for instance, in currencies like it, you can't discard blockchain data is also kind of subtly wrong. It's quite easy in Bitcoin to trust someone else to have already verified that data and then just take the UTXO snapshot. What the difference between that and Mimble is the amount of data that you need to re-verify is smaller, but it's not zero. And it does scale linearly with the number of transactions.
Okay, thanks. And my last question, before I start to ask questions to the audience, this is just purely ideological question. So it's quite likely truly anonymous cryptocurrencies may change the paradigm of mandatory taxation. to the voluntary one? At least like for the governments, may be quite difficult to enforce taxation. So the question, what do you think about this? How do governments can cope with the fact when more people start to use truly anonymous cryptocurrencies for most transactions? Therefore, it will be impossible for the government to see any transaction or enforce transactions. So what do you think about this topic?
So it's something I keep getting back to, but how is the world functioning nowadays in our countries? Does the government need to see all your transactions to perform taxation on the citizens? No. You just declare your tax, and if there is something suspicious, then they might investigate. But your question is so telling about how we tend to see this. The baseline is what we have today, right? If you take a fire insurance for your house, you don't expect the company to put camera in every room just to check that in case you have a fire, you didn't light it yourself, right? They will investigate if they believe there is potential for a fraud. And then the burden of proof is on you in terms of taxation and so on. But what you do is just start giving salary records and so on, and if really they want to dig further, they will look at your bank accounts. But they don't need, that would be mass surveillance. What we want is not mass surveillance, is that if there is legitimate reasons to have suspicion over someone's activity, then the state might step in. So I see privacy by default with opt-in transparency system like Monero or anything else that would have the same properties as a way basically to just replicate what we have nowadays in the fiat system, but in a decentralized manner. So if you want to reveal some information, because the state has some suspicions, you can do so with the view keys. But it's not an a priori transparency over everyone activity. Why are we even asking this question?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of second that. Like, taxation is voluntary in any reasonable country. It's voluntary where I live in Canada. You self-declare. They do spot checks, and that's fine. And it's really funny, too, how people make such a big deal about this, yet you look at the US, which has just slashed the IRS's budget for investigations into tax fraud. So on the one hand, you have people claiming this is such a big deal. On the other hand, they're slashing the budgets to actually investigate tax fraud. And what's probably really happening, of course, is this is just a matter of the rich and powerful saying, well, we would like more control over the rest of the world. We can do this with more surveillance, and simultaneously, we'll slash the budgets of people who actually investigate us. Because by the time you're on the size of, say, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, it's not hard to go figure out how much taxes you're probably going to pay. It's not possible to go hide that level of wealth. It's not even possible to go hide reasonably small levels of wealth. If I own a house, I can't hide the fact I own it. A bit of investigation will figure that out and figure out how much tax I probably should have been paying. This is not hard. Anonymous cryptocurrencies don't change this. We already have one of them anyway. It's called the paper things you have in your wallet. Society runs just fine with this. This is really about power. It's not about, tax avoidance.
Yeah, I agree to the two others, so totally. Pay taxes, and in Germany, if you do the tax declaration with cryptos, just do it and see if you get the approval from the financial institution. Then it's done. It's not so risky or complicated.
Okay, thank you. I think it's time for a question from audience. So raise your hand. Don't hesitate to ask. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. How you doing? My name is Alejandro. I lecture in many colleges. And one of the problems that I see is that people focus too much within privacy or the technology without the user adoption and interface and the opportunity, like the experience itself. So what is your stance within the balance of UX against the technological features and property? Because you can be building the best system in the world, like Monero, but on a practical scale, Dash is the cryptocurrency that is being used the most compared to other anonymous cryptocurrencies due to the quicker and more friendly interface that it has. Thank you.
Well, I think in the big picture, if you go and focus on UX at the expense of actually providing the privacy you promised, of course you're going to go beat out other people in the market. I think we have a lot of examples like that. I mean, there are so-called anonymous cryptocurrencies out there that don't actually implement any anonymity features at all. It's just marketing bullshit. They have great user experience, but they don't actually do what they claim to go do. And I think it's just going to take time for people to improve that. Yet, at the other hand, I'll say, no matter how good you make this stuff, you always have the fundamental problem that most people are going to have, US dollars, euros, whatever in their pocket. The moment you involve a cryptocurrency, now there's one really annoying step of getting something other than the US dollars or the euros or whatever that they have in their pocket. And you'll never be able to improve that much. And that's not a matter of how private the currency is. It's just a matter of the very fact it is a currency. It is a separate thing.
I would add that it's not purely about UI, UX, but it's about the messaging that is given by teams behind a project, whether on decentralized community or company like Zcash. I think it's about being sincere, honest, and not claiming things that might put people in danger. I think that would be a good start, and we rarely see that, sadly.
Thanks. Another question?
Hi, I'm Michael from the Monero hardware team, and just to answer the question, which I'd like to rephrase as, is the Monero hardware team working hard or hardly working? Okay, so we're working hard. We produced all of the badges for DEF CON Village. We produced all of the badges for HCPP, the ones that we're hanging around our necks, and it doesn't mean that we're departing from the hardware wallet. We're still working hard on the hardware wallet. I could rattle off a number of at least a half dozen research elements and a few things that people don't understand too much, like Edwards curve, ED25519, ECDSA processing in hardware while you're maintaining low power. Okay, and yes, everything's fine.
Thank you a lot. Maybe you should explain to all these people how this hardware badge exactly works.
Okay, how many minutes, hours do I have? Right, it's NFC. We had this discussion yesterday, but it's an NFC badge. It has two NFC EPROMs on there, erasable, embedded, programmable, read-only memory, and they're agnostic data storage. So you can put your telephone number on there. You can program them with your own smartphone. It's very easy. Just please back up your secret keys, data, whatever on there before you change it to a telephone number, URI, vCard, or whatever else. So that's how you.
Okay. Thank you. Another question?
I think we could explain that better in about 5 seconds, which is you press a button, and over a radio link, it gives the private keys to the terminal, then it does the transaction for you.
Yeah. Okay, another question?
Hi, thank you. I have a question about Bitcoin. I originally started with the idea that all the privacy features eventually will be adopted on Bitcoin due to network effect, etc. And I've seen several encouraging proposals, but like watching the institutional investors and the ETF play coming in, do you think that it's possible that like this is, once they acquire enough of Bitcoin and they will have certain, I don't know, voting power over proposals, you know, that will lead to actual stop in development of privacy features in Bitcoin? Thank you.
Well, I mean, on one hand, you kind of can't stop it because you can't stop the development in layer 2. You know, once with SegWit, we've really got enough to go and get very good privacy with Lightning. But I'd also go for, you know, give an answer that, you know, I mean, let's say hypothetically, there's certainly possible that they would stop development privacy for regulatory reasons. You know, I think that's a very real concern. But I'd also go point out that if you're a big investor, you may not be very dubious about privacy on that layer because it makes things technologically risky. You know, when you have, say, an inflation bug with potential to destroy the currency if not found, when you can see every single transaction output and the amount attached to it, it's far more likely that you're going to find that bug immediately and solve it and fix it. Whereas at the other extreme, something like Zcash, I have no idea if the trusted setup actually worked. and Zcash isn't being inflated. You know, we might find out in maybe a few months once this Zcash sapling release is implemented and enough people move their Sprout Zcash to sapling that we'll see that total supply, but who knows?
Maybe the battery cent, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I'll give that a sign to keep it short. Long story short is, it's risky because you can't see the amounts, you can't audit them. And on that basis alone, you might say, you know what, let's just have some really boring currency and let layer 2 solve it.
I have a question about DNMs. Why DNMs don't accept Monero? I have seen a research where biggest DNMs use Bitcoin and Bcash, and that's it.
The question was about ATMs, right?
DNMs. Pavel will
Ach
tell
so,
you.
darknet markets. Oh, I don't know. I'm not in the darknet.
Okay, this is like
There's ones that accept Monero, for sure.
Sure.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. I think there are quite a lot of markets which accept
You might ask
Monero.
someone else,
Yeah.
smuggler or someone, I don't know.
Maybe this is just a technical problem. You know how difficult it's implement support of truly anonymous cryptocurrencies, and I think we unfortunately have time only for the last question. So last question.
Hi, I'm Silur from Monero Research Lab, and I have a question about your hardware argument for the need of specific hardware wallets. It sounded kind of an argument for obscurity, and I thought that cryptographers already gave up on that long ages ago. So you said that having a hardware wallet for a specific need makes you a target, and this doesn't sound like security for me, only obscurity.
You mean like my point, like
Yeah, like
Well,
you
I mean-
want to hide the presence of a hardware wallet into a laptop because you can't really find that it's used for anonymous
but I mean,
transactions.
that's just an argument about supply chains.
Sorry?
You know, that's just an argument about supply chains. Like if I go up to you and say, all right, I want to buy a computer,
Yeah.
and I don't tell you what I'm going to use it for, you don't know whether or not it's worth attacking me. Whereas if I go up and say, hey, I want to buy a computer, oh, by the way, I'm going to store 1 billion Bitcoin on there. You're probably going to first laugh at me because it's 21 million. And then you're going to figure, all right, well, maybe this guy's dumb enough. I should put a bug in the laptop and backdoor it. I'm not arguing that the design should be kept secret. I'm just arguing that for that specific supply chain problem of how do you actually buy something and have someone not attack you, you know, some secrecy makes sense. I mean, similarly, if I was to go buy a security camera and say, hey, I want a security camera versus I want a security camera and I'm going to mount it right in my hardware wallet storage room where you can go see me type in the password. Well, me giving you that information is not very smart.
Okay, thanks.
Just to add that you solve a lot of these issues thanks to open hardware, open source specification that you can build yourself. Go and solder. And
Absolutely.
Okay, I'd like to say a big thank you to our speakers.
Thank you. Thanks.
And also to you for attention and for coming.